Numbers chapter 16. We've been in this series for a while now, and I'm just excited. Numbers isn't really a book that you look at usually and go, ooh, that'll be fun to preach out of, but I've been so blessed in this time together. And I want to begin today talking about a good rebellion. I mean, who doesn't love a good rebellion? I think in our hearts, we kind of identify with rebellion. And so for you Star Wars fans, you understand this, right? Like you get Star Wars, the Rebel Alliance, you know? Any good story about an evil empire being overthrown by a bunch of upstart rebels. And here we have Luke Skywalker joining the Rebel Alliance and defeating Darth Vader and destroying the Death Star. He does it twice. I'm sorry, if you haven't seen Star Wars, I just ruined it all. But he destroys it twice, you know, and then the Rebel Alliance replaces the evil empire, and the new republic is formed, and everyone rejoices, everyone loves a good rebellion. And I think in our DNA as a country, we're a bunch of rebels. Like if you look at American history and you look at the Revolutionary War, we rose up as an upstart people against King George, and we waved the flag of American independence, and we fought a battle against the evil empire, and we won. Like we won. I mean, it's crazy. Who doesn't love the story about a good rebellion? But the problem, of course, what do you do with rebellion if the overlord isn't evil? What if the person, the king, the power to be is good? What if, in fact, he's more good than any goodness that we could possibly understand? And this is the lesson we're going to see from Numbers chapter 16 and 17. Rebellion isn't always good. In fact, being a rebel against the good king of the universe, it's most definitely a bad thing, and a dangerous one at that. In fact, if I had one idea I would share with you, I was trying to tell you one thing, like just remember this thing. We'll even put it on the screen for you here. If we rebel against God's chosen leader, we rebel against God himself, and the consequences will be severe. This is a stark message today in Numbers chapter 16 and 17. If we rebel against God's chosen leader, we rebel against God himself. And this is severe in consequence. And I think there's one verse, it's right at the end of our passage, that kind of highlights this idea. God says, or Moses says rather, put back the staff of Aaron before the testimony to be kept as a sign for the rebels. You see, God placed Numbers 16 and 17 in the Holy Scriptures because he wants us to know and be warned that rebellion against God is most definitely not a good thing. The book of Numbers is a story of a journey. I've been telling you this every week. It's a journey in the wilderness. We have this ancient people, the Israelites. We're working about 1,400 years before the birth of Christ. And so these ancient people, these Israelites, God rescues them out of Egypt through crossing the Red Sea. And he says, I'm going to give you a land that's your own. But it takes them 40 years to get there. That's the story of Numbers. It's a story of wandering in the desert. It's a story of a journey between Egypt and the Promised Land. And so really, for 2 weeks in chapters 11 to 14, if we just look at the context, we saw that the chapters 1 to 10 was all about preparation for a journey. Chapter 11, they set out, and immediately God's people start to complain against God, the good God that had rescued them. Chapter 11, complain. Chapter 12, complain. Chapter 13, complain. Chapter 14, complain. And this complaint doesn't go well for them. But in chapter 15, last week, Jordan Correll came and he preached, 2 weeks ago, he preached about God's grace. That we have this atonement, this beautiful atonement that God offers to his complaining, rebellious people. And now immediately in chapters 16 and 17, we're going to see more rebellion. And I think we can relate to this in our hearts. Because if we rebel against God's chosen leader, we rebel against God himself, and the consequences will be severe. Now, I'm going to guess if you're sitting here today, you may not think of yourself as a rebel. Now, some of you do. You're like, yeah, I'm a rebel. But maybe you think, I'm not a rebel against God. I haven't rebelled against Jesus, have I? That's not me. But you need to know the temptation towards rebellion is greater than we think it is. In fact, I think that you and I want to run the show more than we care to admit. So here in the text today, we're going to see the Israelites rise up in rebellion against God's chosen leaders, Moses and Aaron. And we're going to see that this most definitely is a bad thing. Our text today breaks out into two sections, really, that we're going to walk through this together. Verses 1 to 40 of chapter 16, we're going to see them rebel against Aaron. And then, and we're going to see people rise up against Moses and Aaron, the leaders. And so we'll see some leaders rise up. Then in the second half, we're going to see all the people rise up in rebellion against Moses and Aaron. And then at the end, we're going to try to spend some time and think about what this all means for us. So let's start here with just talking about the rebel leaders in verses 1 to 40. Grab your Bible, and I'm going to read and teach through this text at the same time. Verse 1, chapter 16. Now, and there's some great names in here, so we'll have fun with this. Now, Korah, the son of Izhar, the son of Kohath, the son of Levi, and Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab, and On, the son of Peleth, the sons of Reuben, they took men, and they rose up before Moses with a number of the people of Israel. In fact, 250 chiefs of the congregation, chosen from the assembly, well-known men. The first thing we see in this rebellion are the players. Who are the players in this rebellion? Well, we first of all get Korah. Now, Korah is the son of the tribe of Levi. Korah is a Levite, just like Moses and Aaron are Levites from the tribe of Levi. Now, the other two, Dathan and Abiram, and this guy named On, they're from the tribe of Reuben, a different tribe. Now, it's interesting that Dathan and Abiram get all the guilt for what's about to happen. On is never mentioned again. You get him in this verse. I think On decided to turn off and leave the rebellion at some point. He just got out. He said, I think this is a terrible idea. And Dathan and Abiram get the heat of this rebellion. So we got them, and these three guys essentially raise up 250 leaders and say to Moses and Aaron, we don't like you anymore. We would like to issue a vote of no confidence, and we're going to take over. And so we see a coup d'etat. Look at verse 3. They assembled themselves, these guys, and the 250 leaders, together against Moses and against Aaron, and they said to them, oh, you have gone too far. For all in the congregation are holy, every one of them, and the Lord is among them. Then why do you exalt yourself above the assembly of the Lord? And so Korah goes first here. He's the first one to speak. And what he's going to say to Moses and Aaron, and really his complaint is against Aaron. So, because Aaron's the high priest. So Aaron's in this unique position. And Korah's a Levite, which that entire tribe, if you remember, was set aside. They were purchased by God as a special holy people. They were given special instructions, special ways to care for the tabernacle. They have a special duty. They're called holy. And then within the tribe of Levi, you have a subset of Aaron and his descendants that functions as priest. And so Korah's complaint is, Aaron, who are you? Like, we're all holy. God said it. And so who are you to exalt yourself like this? By the end, in verse 11, we really, as we teach through this text, you'll see this is clearly a complaint against Aaron. And this is the difference. He's saying basically, I'm a Levite, but I'd like to be high priest myself. Why do you get to do it? Now look at Moses' response in verse 4. When Moses heard it, he fell on his face, and he said to Korah and all his company, in the morning the Lord will show who is his and who is holy, and will bring him near to him. The one whom he chooses, he will bring near to him. So do this. Take censers, Korah and all his company, put fire in them, and put incense on them before the Lord tomorrow, and the man whom the Lord chooses shall be the Holy One. You have gone too far, sons of Levi. So Korah said to Moses, you've gone too far, Moses. Moses grabs his words and says, oh, no, I'm not the one who's gone too far. You've gone too far. Let's have a test. So he says, bring these censers. A censer, it's like a bowl that you put incense and coals in, and you're able to carry it for ritual participation. And so they are all going to carry these bowls with the incense and the fire, and we are going to see somehow, he doesn't tell us yet, somehow we're going to see which offerings are accepted to God and which are not. You've gone too far, he says. Now look at verse 8. So he continues, and he says to Korah, hear now, sons of Levi, Moses says, verse 9, is it too small of a thing for you that the God of Israel has separated you from the congregation of Israel to bring you near to himself, to do service in the tabernacle of the Lord, to stand before the congregation and minister to them? And he has brought you near to him, and all your brothers, the sons of Levi, with you. And you'd seek the priesthood also? Therefore, it's against the Lord that you and all your company have gathered together. What is Aaron that you grumble against him? So Moses' whole point in response is that, listen, is it not enough? Is it too small a thing? That God already gave you a special and unique role as a Levite. That's not enough for you? You want more? See, Korah wants Aaron's role as high priest, and he doesn't care what anyone says. This is outright rebellion because God had picked Aaron to be the high priest, and Aaron's sons to be priests, Aaron's descendants to be priests before him. Moses rebukes him. Now, the focus shifts in verse 12. First of all, we saw Korah's complaint. Korah was a Levite. Now we're going to see what these two other guys, Dathan and Abiram, have. They're not from the tribe of Levi. They're from the tribe of Reuben. And their beef is not with Aaron. Their beef is with Moses. Look at the text, verse 12. And Moses sent to call Dathan and Abiram, the sons of Eliab. And they said, okay, so he's calling them to this test, this exam. All right, you come out too, and we're going to see whose is the Lord's. We're going to see who's right. But they are not digging any of this because they don't recognize Moses' leadership at all. They say, we will not come up. We're not going to do anything you tell us to do because we don't recognize your authority over us. Verse 13, is it a small thing? Okay, they're using Moses' words against him now. Is it a small thing that you brought us up of a land flowing with milk and honey? They're talking about Egypt. They ascribe Egypt the place of slavery, the place of oppression. They say that was a land flowing with milk and honey. Oh, their memories are short. Their memories are short. He says, you brought us up out of the land flowing with milk and honey to kill us in the wilderness. And that is it now that you must make yourself a prince over us? Moreover, you have not brought us into a land flowing with milk and honey. You've not given us inheritance of fields and vineyards. Will you put out the eyes of these men? Pull the wool over their eyes, that's what that means. We will not come up. I do not recognize your authority over me, Moses, and I'll do what I want to do. And this is the complaint. Who died and made you king, Moses? And then they list their complaints against Moses. All right, it's political season. And so I imagine they ran a political ad against Moses, and it came on the screen and it was like dark gray. And there's a voice there, that said, something like, Moses, failed leader. the evil voice. And then, he took us out of the land to lead us to death. And he didn't deliver what he promised. Moses, failed promises. Vote for Dathan and Abiram. This ad was paid for by the Pack for Israelites returning to milk and honey. Okay, so, I can imagine it's like this, right? They are throwing out Moses, and they're throwing him under the bus, and they're like, we want a new leader. We don't want 4 more years of Moses or 40 more years of Moses. Let's go back. We'll do a different direction. We will not come up. Now look at Moses' response. He's not so happy about this. Moses was very angry, verse 15. And he said to the Lord, don't respect their offering. I have not taken one donkey from them, and I have not harmed one of them. In other words, nothing they're accusing me of is true. And God, you know it. You know it. You know the truth, Lord. And so we see this rebellion at play. And now we're going to have this judgment. In the next few verses, Korah is going to gather these 250 leaders, and they're each going to hold their incense bowl. And, whose is God's going to recognize? And we get a hint in verse 20. Let's skip down to 20. They're holding all these bowls. They're standing before the Lord, and the Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron, saying, separate yourself from among this congregation, that I may consume them in a moment. Guess whose side the Lord is taking? He's like, Moses and Aaron, get away. Step back, because I am just going to bring judgment on this entire rebellion. Now look what Moses and Aaron do. They intercede on behalf of these people. They intercede. Moses and Aaron recognize this is going to go badly. So verse 22, they fell on their faces and said, oh God, the God of the spirits of all flesh, shall one man sin? And will you be angry with all the congregation? And the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, say to the congregation, get away from the dwelling of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. So in other words, Moses and Aaron say, okay, Lord, don't punish everyone for these 3 idiots. I'll intercede for them. And so he intercedes for the people and says, okay, step away from the tents of these 3 idiots. And Moses began in this. And he says, get away. And the people do. Look at verse 27. So they got away from the dwelling of Korah, Dathan, and Abiram. And Dathan and Abiram came out and stood at the door of their tents. These are the guys that says, we're not doing this, but I think their pride finally gets to them. Like, oh yeah, we're coming out. Fine. You want to play this game? We're coming out. We'll show you. They come together with their wives and their sons and their little ones. And Moses says, hereby you shall know that the Lord has sent me to do all these works, and it has not been of my own accord. If these men die as men die, or if they are visited by the fate of all mankind, then the Lord has not sent me. But if the Lord creates something new, and the ground opens its mouth and swallows them up with all that belongs to them, and they go down alive into Sheol, then you shall know that these men have despised the Lord. And so here we see Moses gives this important prediction because his leadership has been challenged. And he says, okay, everyone, if God does something completely unnatural, if they die a normal death, fine. But if they do something weird happens, like the ground opens up. Now, if I'm the people that are hearing all this, I think I take another step back from their tent maybe. Something crazy is about to happen. And look at what happens in verse 31. As soon as he finished speaking all the words, the ground under them, it split apart. The earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up and their households, and all the people who belonged to Korah and all their goods. And so they and all that belonged to them went down alive into Sheol. That's just the Hebrew word for grave. Really, it's not really hell. It's really just this idea of the grave. And the earth closed over them, and they perished from the midst of the assembly. I mean, the ground just opens up. Whoom! They go, boom, they're gone. And the earth just, boom, shuts. Instantaneous affirmation that God's chosen leaders are Moses and Aaron. Now, there's this disturbing bit here about their families. Okay, you got 3 idiots. Why are their families paying with them? That's whoa, it's kind of a big deal. Well, it's interesting because later on in chapter 26, we're going to read that not all the family of Korah died. We'll see that later in 26. You're going to see exactly what happened. Moses said, get away. And those who went, yeah, Korah, you're crazy. We're out. We're not rebelling. They all got away. And the ones that were no, we're with Korah in this rebellion, they stayed there. And all of a sudden, the wrath of God is poured out. Now, rightfully so, look at verse 34. All Israel who were around them fled at their cry, for they said, lest the earth swallow us up. We're gonna die. I mean, they're just terrified. Can you imagine if you were standing there and the earth opened up and whoop, can you imagine this? Yeah, rightfully so. They're terrified. God's not done dealing with judgment yet, though. Look at verse 35. These three guys, these three idiots are dealt with. But what about the 250 that they recruited to join this rebellion? Well, God's got something to say to them, too. And if you look here at the text, he says in verse 35, and fire came out from the Lord and consumed the 250 men offering the incense. Whoa. I mean, the ground just opened up. Now fire comes down and consumes this rebellion. And then God says in verse 36, the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, tell Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, to take up the censers out of the blaze. So like everything that was not metal burned up. What's left? The metal things. Then scatter the fire far and wide, for they've become holy. As for the censers of these men who have sinned at the cost of their lives, let them be made into hammered plates as a covering for the altar, for they offered them before the Lord, and they became holy, and thus they shall be a sign to the people of Israel. In judgment, they became what they thought they already were. They became holy. The fire made them holy. All that's left is the bowls. So what he does is says, let's take these, melt them down. We'll create a bronze covering for the altar so it serves as a reminder. Don't be an idiot. Don't be every time you look at it, you go, oh yeah, that didn't go so well for those who were rebellious. And so they do. They melt it down. And in verse 38, it says, this shall be a sign to the people of Israel. It's a sign, a remembrance. So you see, the leaders of the rebellion were judged severely because they rebelled against God's chosen leader, which meant they rebelled against God himself, and the consequences were severe. But it wasn't just these people, these 250, these three. It wasn't just leaders that were rebelling against God's leader. We actually find out all the people are involved in this rebellion. And we're going to see that. And that's when we move to the second point today. If the first one was the rebel leaders, now we look at the rebel nation itself. Now there's a pattern in the text, and I just want you to see this. I want to explain it to you so you can see the repetition going on. When he judged Korah, Dathan, and Abiram, we saw a rebellion. We saw judgment of God. We saw intercession of Moses and Aaron. We see God refine his judgment. And then we saw a reminder. That same pattern is going to take place when all the people rebel against God's chosen leaders. So we're going to see the same pattern. They're going to rebel. Look at verse 41. On the next day, all the congregation of the people of Israel grumbled against Moses and against Aaron, saying, you have killed the people of the Lord. They're not happy. They went from being afraid and running away to shaking their fists at Moses, shaking their fists at Aaron. Look what you did. And so judgment comes again. Skip down to verse 44. The Lord spoke to Moses, saying, get away from the midst of the congregation, that I might consume them in a moment. Okay, do you see what's going to happen again? And what do Moses and Aaron do? They intercede. They fall on their faces. And they intercede. Verse 45, about halfway through. And they fell on their faces. Verse 46. And Moses said to Aaron, take your censers and put fire on it from off the altar, and lay incense on it, and carry it quickly to the congregation. Make atonement for them, for wrath has gone out from the Lord. The plague has begun. Then we see revised judgment, verse 47. So Aaron took it, as Moses said, and ran into the midst of the assembly, and behold, the plague had already begun amongst the people, and he put on the incense, and he made atonement for the people. And so here we see it again. Judgment revised. So rebellion, judgment, intercession, judgment, and then we get a reminder of God's grace. And this is all of, the reminder is really long this time. All of chapter 17. Let me just summarize what happens in chapter 17. We got another contest. Aaron takes his staff, and every tribe appoints a leader, and they all write their name on the staff, and they take them into the tabernacle, the holy place of God, and they plant them in the ground, and they leave them overnight. And when they come back in the morning, Aaron's staff has budded and blossomed with like almond blossoms. I mean, this is a clear miracle. Wooden staffs don't just blossom overnight. And so here we see God, it's God's way of saying, this is my chosen one. This is the guy. Look at verse 10. What does he say to do with it? And the Lord said to Moses, put back the staff of Aaron before the testimony to be kept as a sign for the rebels, that you may make an end of their grumblings against me, lest they die. Thus did Moses, as the Lord commanded him, so he did. Here's another sign, another reminder. Don't be that idiot. Don't be that idiot. You see, they rebelled against God's chosen leader, which meant they rebelled against God himself, and the consequences were severe. What do we do with this? I mean, like, what? We don't have Moses. We don't have Aaron. We don't have that kind of situation and setup. So how do we apply this? Well, we have to ask, who's the Lord's chosen one? And how might I rebel against him? So how do we play? Who is the Lord's chosen one? The third thing I want to talk about today is this. And it's just really an application of this entire text. I think the application of this is pretty obvious. Don't mess with Pastor Dave, or the ground is going to open up and swallow you. So, like, right? Or even, how about this one? If you don't vote for the correct person on Tuesday, fire will burn you to a crisp. I mean, yikes. Seriously, okay? We have to ask this question. Who today is God's chosen leader so that we will know if we are rebelling against him or her? Who is it? How do we rebel against God's anointed one? Who's our Moses? Who's our Aaron? And how do we rebel against him? This is where we have to take Numbers and we have to put it in the context of the entire story of the Bible. If we do not do this, we'll end up with bad applications like some pastor telling you, do what I say or else. Okay? Who is the chosen one in all of the story of the Bible? He comes 1,400 years after Moses. And his name is Jesus. And he is the anointed one. Acts 10:30, I'm just going to read some passages of the New Testament. You know Jesus of Nazareth, how God anointed him. Matthew 16, Peter says, Jesus, you are the Christ, which means Messiah or chosen or anointed one. Matthew 1, Jesus, he's the son of David, the rightful heir to the throne of David. Matthew 28, he has all authority. He says, all authority in heaven and earth has been given to me. So it's absolutely clear in the New Testament that the chosen and anointed leader is none other than Jesus. He is the reigning king. He is the Holy One. He's our leader. And we must be absolutely clear on this point. Please do not miss that. We have no other leader who is greater than Jesus. Not one. To give a greater allegiance to anyone else above Jesus is rebellion against God. And if any other allegiance supplants our allegiance to Jesus, we have a problem. You see, if we rebel against Jesus, we rebel against God himself. And the consequences are severe. So, okay, how do we do this? If Jesus is the anointed leader, how do we rebel against him? How do you give your allegiance to someone else? Because we started this thing, And I'm like, you probably don't think of yourself as a rebel against Jesus, right? Certainly not against God. You're like, I'm on team Jesus. But I think this temptation towards rebellion is ingrained in our hearts. In fact, I think we give our allegiance to other people without thinking twice about it. I think we give away a greater allegiance to others other than Jesus. How do we do this? Well, I think the text gives us two great examples of how we do this. We find another holy person and we give our allegiance to him or her, or we find another civil authority and we give our allegiance to him or her. We choose our own religious leaders. Korah wanted another priest. He didn't like Aaron. He wanted someone else to bridge the gap between God and people. Jesus is our high priest. The author of Hebrews makes that extensively clear. We have one high priest, his name is Jesus. One mediator between God and man, the man Christ Jesus. And sometimes we unintentionally choose someone else to bridge the gap between God and us. We can't see Jesus, right? You're like, where's Jesus? I can't see him. Oh, I'll go find somebody else who maybe can show me the way to God. And we get ourselves in a world of hurt. Okay, this is where I'm back to my whole beef with celebrity Christians. Oh, it's just nauseating to me. Because we just do it. We like put a musician or a pastor or a speaker, or someone's got a great podcast, and we just elevate them to this status like, oh, that person, he'll show me the way to God. He'll speak truth. And we like them because they're confident. They say things that we always wanted to say but never had the nerve to, you know? Or they have this charismatic personality. They're flamboyant, entertaining. And all of a sudden, I find myself relying on a person to connect you to God. You have a mediator. And his name is Jesus. Don't give that role to anyone else, including me. I don't want it. That's Jesus. He's your mediator. Okay, so last summer, we had driven all the way out to California. We ended up in California on our vacation. And while we were there, I got invited to like a house dinner party because Clarissa's relatives out there knew somebody who knew somebody. And Francis Chan was going to be at this house dinner party talking about his work with orphans overseas. And so we got invited to go to this thing. And you know how I feel about celebrity Christians. And so we walked into this house, and I didn't know anyone, which, you know, like I just loathe gatherings where I don't know anyone. And so I'm sitting there, and Francis Chan, I don't know, half hour into it, comes up to me, and he sticks out his hand, and he says, "Hey, I'm Francis. Nice to meet you." If you don't know who Francis Chan is, he's like a famous author, preacher guy, okay? And so he sticks out his hand, "Hey, Dave, I'm Francis. It's nice to meet you." And I said, I looked at him, and I thought about it, and I said, Francis, I'm really not about this whole Christian famous thing. In fact, I don't even know why I'm here, Francis, because like your fame actually detracts from Jesus' fame. And he looked at me. Okay, I didn't say any of that, all right? I did I didn't say any of that to him. I said, "Hi, Francis, I'm Dave. It's nice to meet you," okay? And if you have followed Francis Chan at all or know anything about him, if I did say it, he'd probably go, "Yeah, I agree. Can you please make me unfamous? I'd like to be unfamous." And then I'd say, "Oh, why do you have to be so cool like that? Stop it." And then I would tell people, and they elevated Francis Chan. So frustrating. We have this propensity in us to do this. And the thing is, if we elevate, sometimes it's not their fault, it's ours. Because we're looking for another mediator other than Jesus. And so some of you need to stop quoting Christian authors like they're the second incarnation of Christ. It detracts from the glory of Christ. He's the Holy One. He's the one you need. So you need to stop listening to your podcast of your favorite person because, man, Like, you're just elevating this lady or this guy. Stop it. You're rebelling against Jesus when you give the authority to mediate to someone else other than him. But there's a second way we rebel against Jesus. We place our faith in a civil leader. That's not Jesus. Okay, hopefully I'm going to do this and not get in trouble, but maybe I will. Did you know there's an election on Tuesday? I saw this. I looked at my sample ballot. There are 7 candidates for president on the ballot. 7 of them. And assuming, I'm assuming this. So I look at these 7 names, trying to think about who am I going to vote for? What am I going to do? Someone along the line, someone is going to tell you that one of these 7 people is God's chosen person to be president of the United States. And if they tell you that, run away. Run away. Because they're supplanting Jesus. He's our leader. God has chosen no one else. Jesus. We Christians have an anointed leader. And he's not running to be in charge. He is in charge. He's king, and he wasn't elected. He was anointed by the Father because Jesus is God. So Tuesday, when you go to vote, please, I'm begging you, remember that whoever you check, whatever box you tick, is not Jesus. You should just go, nope, not Jesus. Your allegiance belongs solely to him. Now, if you vote for anyone other than Jesus on Tuesday, you're voting for the wrong person. Now, you're like, Dave, hey, Jesus isn't on the ballot. I mean, you could write him in, I guess, but I don't know. Okay, I got it. I got it. Which just means there's no correct candidate, right? Like, there's no one chosen. Jesus is the chosen anointed king. So, like, what do? Well, you got to figure out which candidate best encourages the best civil society while we wait for Jesus to come back. And whoever you choose, I'm guaranteeing you will choose the wrong person. Guaranteed. You will choose wrong. Someday, Jesus will come back. I promise you. He is coming back. And there won't be an election. He will reign as righteous king. And he will make every decision perfectly. He will make it perfectly. There will be no debate council on whether the King Jesus got it right. He'll get it perfectly. In the meantime, let's not get distracted from our allegiance to Jesus because we're so easily distracted. We're like toddlers. Have you ever been having a conversation with a toddler and then the TV comes on? Forget that conversation, right? Sorry, have you ever had a conversation with a teenager and the TV comes have you ever had a conversation with Dave and the TV comes on? We are so easily distracted. Everything around us distracts us from our King. So what happens if I realize that I've given my allegiance to either a religious figure or a political person? What happens? There's all this talk about the wrath of God in this text. It makes us uncomfortable. Do I have to worry that fire's going to consume me, or I'm going to get cancer and die because I voted for the wrong person? Or do I have to worry about the wrath of God coming down? And the answer is no. You do not. Why, Dave? Why? Because of what Jordan talked about last week. He talked about propitiation and his wife's mother, and talking about this word propitiation, this beautiful word that means all the wrath that is due you and me is poured out on Jesus. Because God gave his son. He gave his life. And all the wrath that was due you, and that you know, just take 3 seconds to look at your life. You know you deserve it. And all of that is poured out on Jesus. So for you and I, when we come and say, oh, I gave my allegiance to the wrong person, I rebelled against Jesus, you confess it, and guess what? The wrath doesn't go to you because he's faithful and he's just. And he forgives it because of Jesus. If we rebel against God's chosen leader, we rebel against God himself, and the consequences are severe, and Jesus takes those. Now, we must still address the rebellious nature of our hearts. I have a rebellious heart. I just do. And there are times when I rebel against the authority of Jesus. In fact, I kind of loathe any authority that wants to control me. I know this every March and September because I look at my heart when I pay my property taxes. I mean, whether you own a home or rent a home, you're paying property taxes, right? And I just hate it. I'm writing this check over. I'm going to give this to someone who's not Jesus, who's not going to make good decisions, going to do things that I don't even want them to do, maybe. Like, I can't trust those people. They're fallen, sinful, selfish human beings. They're going to make the wrong choice. And I get up in my heart and I want to rebel and not pay this property tax. But I also want to keep my house. And guess what the New Testament says? Be subject to the civil governing authorities. Okay. I know this rebellious heart is in me, and guess what? Sometimes that rebellion gets transferred to the King of the universe, and I say, whatever you want, I don't want it. I want my own way. But guess what? While I can't trust other human beings to perfectly manage stuff, I can trust Jesus. I mean, he is perfect, without sin. You see, I don't rebel against Jesus by appointing myself leader, but I do recognize my tendency to want to do that, and I confess it to him, and he's eager to forgive. All right, we're going to close with a song. I picked this song because of the lyrics. It's Come Thou Fount. There's a couple lyrics you need to pay attention to when we're singing this. Our worship team is coming. Pay no attention to them. First of all, there's this word Ebenezer in this song. An Ebenezer is a memorial. I raised my Ebenezer and said, what is an Ebenezer? It's not Ebenezer Scrooge. It's different. An Ebenezer is a memorial. I raise it. So just like Aaron's staff or just like the bronze covering, we come with the memorial of Jesus and what he's done for us. And then there's this other line that says, it talks about our tendency to rebel. My heart is prone to wander. Lord, I feel it, prone to leave the God I love. And we sing this because we cry out, God, I need your forgiveness for my rebellious heart. And he grants it